teaching the literature and using it as a pedagogical resource clearly demand a proper pedagogical framework. This respect, if we consider that the digital medium is an important part of the aesthetic of the literature works, and that the medium is typified by the action of remediation between the message and the addressee, if we consider that the dynamic organic interaction between human beings and machines that typify the literature work is a sort of cognitive movement between digital and analogic cognizer, according to Catherine Hales, and if we consider that the literature works are often typified by what Italo Calvino used to define combinatory process and what Umberto Eco calls openness of a literary work, well, a pedagogical framework based on the concept of movement as the post-constructivism could be very appropriate for the pedagogy of electronic literature. E-literature can indeed be used as a real didactic technology. Why? Because it provides cognitive stimuli that seem to offer interesting advantages in the learning process. That's to say, it demands the user to adopt different capacities together, mixed in an unusual way. It offers an active perspective, perceptive experiences previously unthinkable. It merges semiotic system in ways previously not possible, fostering new connection between ideas and emotions. It stimulates the decision-making that traditional linear reading processes usually do not provide, fostering a process of deep thinking. It offers appealing modalities for the knowledge-building process, taking advantage of the artistic and interactive features. It also stimulates the learning by doing with new informal and playful modalities, fostering multi-semic, multimodal, multi-sectoral intellectual stimulation, providing multiple knowledge configurations, and by offering a creative, dynamic, active interaction. In this respect, let's have a look at the NLE. The narrative learning environments are e-learning environments where stories interactively created by user and system have a central role in facilitating learning. They are hypermedia environments where the user interacts in a non-trivial way with the system to generate a consistent narrative. This kind of NLEs are used to foster narrative, creative logic and problem-solving skills in the user or in the student. The concept behind such program is the same that we find in a typical literary domain, that's to say the interactive drama or the interactive fiction.
Literary conditions of a literary game, and whether the game is actually meant to be won or can be won, and what that means for its aesthetic function. Or we might look at how a game's multimodal makeup contributes to the play with the reader, for example by smothering them with a host of sensory signals, which might impede successful gameplay in order to promote an anti-ludic procedural rhetoric. Of course, these seemingly separate categories converge in many places when applied analytically. So what I'll try and do in the last few minutes of my talk is to show you how we can pick and choose from this toolkit to begin to form a coherent ludo-stylistic analysis. And I think Nelson's evidence of everything exploding offers a perfect case study because of its multiple layers of poetic, semiotic and ludic encoding. Avoid and unlock things for strategy and actions. The reach for victory and termination conditions, and for win for match cocktails for rewards. I'll explain the more cryptic ones as I go along. Playing the game, which happens via cursor keys and mouse, feels much like walking through the maze of an intro.
When they go. The Book of Going Forth by Day is the Middle Kingdom name for the Egyptian Book of the Dead. It was usually done on the inside of coffins, but it often was done in manuscript form too, and this is a manuscript form of the book. Two things led me to doing this. The first was the story of Isis and her role in the Assyrian legend. I'll just say quickly that what fascinated me was that Isis was the operative in this religious myth. It is she who follows Osiris and down the Nile into the
function of the program. It will do the same thing. So you switch out the top comment to say something like that. Everything will work the same. It's a space that really is there for the human reader. It's there because the code is something that a person is going to understand, potentially modify, will have a potential future to it. And some of the comments that were examined by Mark Marino looking at Jim Andrews' work in Aleph Null are very typical of this. It's the ordinary way in which people write in all sorts of code. But in creative contexts, this is also a comment that this is on a forum where people are sharing amusing comments that they've seen in code. So here we have a trace of the business process and the actual way that coders work together that's going into the way that a program is written. And so all of these things are part of very ordinary uses of comments across different types of projects, not specific to creative or literary work. This is purportedly from an early version of Unix. I don't know which section of the code specifically, but putting a warning to say like, don't mess with this. You don't understand it. I wrote it and I don't understand it either. That's also a frequent thing that one does with comments. And you can see that here, some creative play in terms of ASCII is coming into the program itself. This is a obfuscated program in Perl, just another Perl hacker program, and these are programs that print the phrase "just another Perl hacker." And it seems that there are two comments in this program. It seems that the author of the program, Casey West, occurs at the top comment, and then there's a comment in the third line that is just another Perl hacker. But this actually uses a type of obfuscation that is comment code confusion. And what looks like a comment there is actually indicating some data that it's going to use to print the message, just another Perl hacker. So what looks to you to be something that's irrelevant to the program's execution, you're being tricked by. And of course, it would be typical in certain genres of creative code writing, like developing obfuscated code, to either use comments in a confusing way or not to use them at all. So if you look at things like very constrained work in the demo scene or my PPG 256 series, there are no actually all of the PPG 256 programs after my last pass through and compressing them further, they do have comments.
This is a little bit. I'm talking to the theme of our panel here, duets and duels, because that happens to bear on our project in several ways. I realize you guys don't know what our project is, but Nick is showing you here. Our goal was to work on and to create a proof of concept for a computational poetics with our comments. This task involves moving certain long entrenched duels into duet mode, among them the prevailing presumed conflict between print and digital conventions, print and digital readability, compositional versus computational strategies, and what I call typical versus common, or insights based on counting, distinguished from those based on social intuition. Not every possible duel resolves to a duet. For instance, the glosses as a whole in our piece, if read linearly, do not read as a standalone paper, to the consternation of some of our first outside readers. Now, the outside readers are the people who are going to print this in a magazine, right? Although they specifically acknowledged that what our Code Plus Comments paper did is challenge the genre constraints, i.e. duels, between creative and critical writing, print and digital textuality, text and code when they accepted the paper. No more does the code, read linearly, appear consecutive in chronological or rhetorical terms, even though since it runs, it is logically consecutive. And I think this confusion exists where we try to cross this boundary.
Now, another option might be
something new. Jerklana Nizak.
Weema Boobanuki. Kububanuki.
Nargla. Nigla Sachi. Bena Wisdazi. Tries it.
Right, so this is the solution of The Sims, right? The solution of The Sims is basically to say, okay, we're going to have a world that can change in many ways. Instead of a world and a story that are always fixed, these characters might never meet. This character might never exist. Who knows what characters you're going to create? And we're going to have a relatively simple model of kinds of things that Sims like to talk about and don't like to talk about, of their openness to things like becoming greater friends with each other and so on. And it's all going to be represented in a way that matches that relatively simple possibility space, right? So these are sort of friendly animations, and it turns out that both these Sims like talking about film. And instead of trying to realize any of that in language, which might suggest that more is going on than actually is going on, we're just going to be very simple. So this is called Simlish, and that's the title of my talk. Is Shakespeare and Simlish. Obviously trying to, in some ways, reference previous work in the field, right? But basically, the idea is that I think I'm probably not alone in thinking that even though there might be some interesting, like it would be great to have Gail Nelson do a Simlish performance, if any of you know him, right? Like Alfred Jerry and so on, right? Like there's something there, but I think there's a real ceiling as well, right? Or maybe a box, right? That there's lots we might want to explore that the box of Simlish would not let us explore in terms of what we might mean by electronic literature. And I guess I would say, basically, yeah, we're trading the ambiguity of language for something like Simlish icons, and we're also trading all the power of language for something like Simlish icons. So I would say that, at least I, and hopefully we, I'm going to include all of you willy-nilly in this talk, and you can tell me when I'm wrong. I should have just been saying I. I think we want more than being able to indicate simple topics and emotions like Simlish gives us. We want more, oh, that should say than complex propositions and plot statements. I think Daikto, whether using words or using icons, is not all we want. I'd say, we want the possibility of the expressive and evocative powers of language, right? Whether we're talking about creative or uncreative writing, whether we're pre-digital or post-digital or highly digital or whatever. I think there's something about language that's important to the project. So I'd say one option that has been explored is to essentially do what books do, and certainly I've done this, right? So like my piece, The Book of Endings, essentially says what we're going to do is we're going to have fixed pieces of language, and those fixed pieces of language are going to communicate the things that we want them to communicate. And then people will move around by other means. They'll move around inside of images, they'll move around by clicking links. This is a familiar strategy from Story Space. This is not that dissimilar to what happens in an interactive fiction like Zork, right? So I'd say the text can be powerful, but it's largely or entirely separated from the system. There's either little or no world represented that connects to the language. So I'd say another option is to say, okay, well, what if we want the language to actually feel more dynamic, right? What if we want the language to be more included in the things the system is operating on? Well, one is to basically animate chunks of text, right? I've done projects like this, like Screen, right, where essentially you have a graphical system and then you put words on the graphics, right? You make the graphics into words. And I'd say this is a way that you can engage people in an activity that is metaphorically connected to what the language is about. And I think that that's another interesting possibility. But again, I'd like to imagine further possibilities. Another is to make language the focus of interaction, right? To actually try to do something with language that operates kind of linguistically, right? So I've done a few experiments in kind of linguistic manipulation. One of them, the impermanence agent, all the interaction was kind of browsed to various sites on the web, but then it takes apart, according to relatively simple linguistic rules, both the things you've been browsing and its own text, and finds places where it can follow its rules to do linguistic substitutions. Or in something like regime change, it generates and replaces text based on n-grams that are found in various bodies of text, right? And you're sort of playing with the statistical probabilities of n-grams. And again, I think this is interesting, right? You're sort of playing with language. You really are creating a piece that's about the language that you selected or given rules for selecting. I'd say, you know, there's no path towards story. At best, you're getting at it metaphorically, maybe even more metaphorically than you are with the graphical system. So, I guess my question is, you know, what if we want language that operates via fictional logics? What if we want language that responds dynamically to an interactive fictional world? What if we want language that captures the voice of characters, and characters that can change, right? Characters that aren't always the same. So another option is quantum authoring of dialogue templates. I don't know if any of you ever heard of this. But you can basically insert Aaron's talk here, right? So this is one possibility that I've been finding very interesting over the last couple of years, is sort of thinking about how you write scenes for the right kinds of specificity so that they can play parts in a fictional world. And particularly for a fiction where people feel some responsibility, right? Like, I might identify with a character in a game like Uncharted, but I know I have absolutely no responsibility for what happens in it because it has all been written ahead of time. And I don't feel really any responsibility in most versions of The Sims, as we can see by my willingness to set them on fire, right? But one of the things that we have seen in a number of reviews of Prom Week is people saying, you know, I felt guilty afterwards about things that I had made happen in the